by Rudyard Kipling. The moment we hear the name Rudyard Kipling, what comes to mind is, of course, the Jungle Book. Well, Rudyard Kipling was born in British India. I usually begin every episode telling you something about the age in which the poet lived and wrote. But here, I'm going to talk about something slightly different. Some of you might be aware of the word Anglo-Indian. It refers to a community of people, generally of mixed parentage. That is, parents were British and Indian. Gradually, that word is going out of our vocabulary. But Rudyard Kipling was an Anglo-Indian. We could say more so because he lived in British India. Yes, he wrote in the English language. And this poem is not just because it was written by Rudyard Kipling, but because it lives on in our memories ever so well. Rudyard Kipling, 1865 to 1936, wrote short stories and poems. In fact, some of his poems and short stories are considered to be really different. Some consider him to be an innovator of the short story in India. Well, he went to the JG School of Art in Mumbai, and can you imagine, is the youngest ever to win the Nobel Prize. He won the Nobel Prize at the age of 41 in the year 1907. And imagine, the first English writer too. He was exposed, like most of us Indians, to a number of languages because he spoke English with his parents. But remember, he lived in India and therefore spoke Hindi with his servants. Traveled a lot, went to UK, USA, Canada, and I love the fact that he met Mark Twain on one of his travels. When we think of Rudyard Kipling, a new word comes to mind again, another new word, duology. Have you heard of that? Nothing to do with biology, but something to do with trilogy, which is so popular today. Duology is two books. I believe there is a Jungle Book 1 and a Jungle Book 2, and therefore we have the word duology when we think of this writer. If is a poem from the book Rewards and Fairies and follows the story Brother Square Toes. What is the poem about? It's paternal advice from a father to a son. I have to begin by reading the poem. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. You know, the entire poem is a series of advice, one following the other. If we just pause to think, I think if we follow them, life will indeed be wonderful. I don't want to call it a bed of roses because it might not be that simple. But what he's talking about is how it is important to retain your cool. You know, the word cool is very popular today, but this is about not being affected by things around you. Can you keep your head high? Can you not hate when the world hates you? Such an important piece of advice in today's world when we are torn by strife and divisions of all kinds. So he says, when people hate you, Don't give way to hatred. And keep your head cool. Don't allow others to decide what you should do. Yes, the world can doubt you, but you will have to trust yourself. And then he goes on. Remember, it's a father talking to his son, and therefore he has so much to tell him about how life has to be lived. Can you imagine how the father goes on? The poet goes on. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, this is so important. Many of us can think, many of us can talk, but how many of us have the courage to act, put that into action? And therefore he says, if you can think but not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster, I think that's the toughest. Don't be on the top of the world, or don't go into the depths of despair. And he says they are both impostors, both triumph and disaster, because they are short-lived. If you can bear to hear the truth you have spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. I want to remind you, my dear friends, that this poem was written in 1895. And today, we see how everything is twisted, how things are taken out of their context and given their own meaning. But this is Rudyard Kipling writing in 1895. If you can bear to hear the truth you have spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools. And then the next verse. If you can make one heap of your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at the beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. Don't sit crying, don't sit whining, don't sit mooning. But if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there's nothing in you, but you still have something. And what is that? The will which says to them, hold on. After all that advice, he concludes the poem by saying, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, don't live in an ivory tower. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run. Remember, all of us have the same time, but we have to make the best use of our time. Everyone has a minute which has 60 seconds. And then my favorite lines of the poem. If you can do all this, he said, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son. I'm not sure what age the son was when the father gave him all this advice, but I think it holds true any age, any man, any woman, any son, any daughter. Every poem I read, I look at, I also search for figures of speech because they add something to the joy. Of course, the theme is there, but very often some of us miss what we call the tone of the poem. You know, what is the tone here? Some people criticize this poem saying it's very didactic, but I don't agree. And what does the word didactic mean? You know, I sit up on a pedestal and I'm preaching, do this, don't do this. I don't think Kipling is doing things. I don't think the father is doing this. In fact, I would say it's a poem filled with optimism and joy. How life can be, how life should be lived. Of course, there are the usual figures of speech. There is personification. There are symbols throughout. a couple of metaphors thrown here and there. But I guess what we all need to look at is the theme of the poem. And what is the theme of the poem? How life should be lived, how life can be lived. And if we do try and live life according to these ideas, this piece of advice, suggestions, I think life will be wonderful because you will be a real human being. This poem, as you've seen, is about a father's advice to his son. Ever so many fathers, I'm sure, have given such advice. But I'm thinking of Abraham Lincoln's letter to his son's teacher. Can you imagine? There the advice is not to the son, but to the teacher. That again is a wonderful poem. But remember, there's one more by the great bard, Willie Shakespeare. And it is about his advice. Whose advice? Polonius's advice to his son. That is a poem filled with irony because Polonius has nothing that he is advising his son about. Remember, I end almost every episode by telling you what you should read. I would ask you to read both these. Abraham Lincoln's letter to his son's teacher. And of course, Polonius's advice to his son.